After the First World War, Germany was left humiliated and economically shattered. The nation struggled under the weight of defeat, and its people longed for someone who could restore hope.
Her full name is Gert Friedrich Franz Schmitz.
In 1933, Adolf Hitler rose to power, promising revival and national strength. The economy improved, the military expanded, and many Germans believed their country was rising again, while propaganda tightened its grip on every part of daily life.
And I remember on September the 1st, 1939, Hitler was on the radio telling that the war started. Since 5 o'clock this morning, our troops marching into Poland, doing whatever they do best. 6 months later, Hitler marched into the France. The British came and the Americans came into the war. And I talked to my grandpa, and he told me, he said, if they want to win the war, it don't look too good. He said, don't say that, Grandpa, we cannot lose the war. That was not even remotely in my mind that we ever could lose a war, you know.
Like millions of Germans, Gert grew up in a world where Nazi propaganda controlled every voice, shaping what the public believed and blinding them from the reality of the front lines.
Because we were so conditioned politically. Hitler controlled the newspapers, they controlled the radio, Goebbels, the propaganda minister, he controlled everything else. And we listened to the news and they told us all about going on in the Western Front and how successful they are and all that. Then we walked outside and we heard the guns. And you say, well, that is too close from what they tell us where they're supposed to be.
Like many young boys, Gert's childhood was shaped by the Nazi system. Joining the Hitler Youth wasn't a choice. It was the path every boy was pushed onto.
They had everything organized. You couldn't get lost or fall through the cracks. You know, there were no cracks. You were part of it if you liked it or not. I got drafted into the Hitler Youth when I was 10 years old. And they gave us a uniform and all that, you know.
Amid propaganda and strict discipline, there were also opportunities that captivated young minds. For Gert, it was the chance to train as a jet pilot, flying Germany's revolutionary Messerschmitt 262.
They said, do you want to go to a jet pilot training school? We have one in Fulda, Germany. And you go over there and you start training for flying Messerschmitt 262 jets. He says, shoot, yeah.
But before he could begin, the war arrived at his airfield before he did.
And when I got up there, the hangars were bombed, the runways were bombed, the airplanes were bombed. And there was nothing left for us to do. And they said, well, we'll temporarily assign you to a paratrooper outfit and send you to the Western Front.
Instead of becoming a pilot, Gert was thrown into a collapsing front where chaos replaced strategy and survival replaced orders.
So we got on the train that afternoon. We ended up in Pasewalk. We talked to the people, the local people there. They heard on the news that the Russians had just come from the south, from the east and south, and cut off that air base where we were. And that was bad news. That was chaos. The whole German armed forces was in total chaos. We didn't know where they were. I don't know where the headquarters were. You didn't know where the real front was or anything. You know, you're so busy surviving and fighting. We either won here or we lost over there and then go to the next. We don't know the overall picture. We have no idea what happened.
While moving through Holland, Gert faced the terrifying dominance of American P-51 Mustangs, aircraft that ruled the skies and hunted anything that moved.
And then we finally marched into Holland. The street was open between the town and the woods were the forest where we were supposed to go into. And it was kind of exposed, you know. And the Allies always flew 8 fighter planes roaming in the sky. They had total sky superiority. And we had to get across that open space, and those guys were flying around there saying, if we go in the column over there, they see us and they're going to mow us down. So, but if you go one guy every 100 feet, they may not even pay attention to us. So it came my time to go across, and the guy paid attention to me. And he came and started shooting at me. I went into that deep ditch. And as soon as he went past me, I got out and run down toward the woods. And when I came the other way, I jumped back in the ditch. And finally got wise. Instead of going across, he came down alongside the ditch and just unloaded. Bullets flying behind me and in front of me. I mean, there was bullets flying every way. So he got up and I ran, and I didn't go back in the ditch. I went all the way into the woods. Yeah, that was kind of nasty. But I hate Mustangs to this day.
In the town of Ramsdorf, Gert and his friend confronted enemy tanks at close range, an encounter where every second meant life or death.
We were in Ramsdorf. That was my buddy and I. We were up at one end of town, and we had a bazooka. The tank came down the street, and they started shooting, and we run behind those big logs there, and they couldn't hit us there. He pulled that trigger, and when he hit, it said, woof. He got that warhead right between the tracks in the body. And he just blew the hell out of the inside, and nothing moved anymore after that. There was another tank that was up the street, and we standing in there kind of looking down the street, see what we could do. And he said, I'm going to go on the other side of the street because it was curved a little bit, he could see better. He said, don't go over there, that tank is up there. And while I was in the middle in the street, that tank shot one round right between his legs. I went over there and got him. The shrapnel went into his uniform and ripped his chest open. And he was sitting with his butt in the street. And he said, and then he collapsed.
During their retreat, Gert's unit marched straight into an American trap. Only 4 men escaped into the woods, wandering behind enemy lines until they reached Dortmund, where one desperate attempt to hide led to their capture.
When we marched into Ramsdorf first earlier, the company commanders told us, they say, you go point to make sure everything is all right. And way later on, after we were supposed to move out, they said, man, we probably want to point again, if we the first one out. And the company commander said, you're the rear guard. So they said, no, you don't want to be on the rear on the way out. You want to be front. But anyway, there was an open field, and they wanted to march into the woods. And what we were way behind as a rear guard, they walked into a trap. The Americans, they already were on 3 sides, and they waited till the whole battalion marched in there, and they mowed them down. So the 4 of us, we went off to the right into the woods and disappeared in the woods. And that's how we ended up behind enemy lines. And then when we finally got into Dortmund, it was daylight, and there was a 6-foot fence, a chain link fence. They said, well, that must be a park. Nobody is fighting in the park, so we're going to be pretty safe. So we got over and climbed over that 6-foot fence. GIs walking all over the place there. And they saw us, and they started shooting at us. They had a 2.5 truck with machine guns on there. They came around and started shooting at us with that. And then we said, we got to get out of this park. So we jumped over the fence. Then there was tanks on the outside. They said, that ain't not safe either. Let's jump back in the fence. We jumped back over that 6-foot fence. And then that truck came and started shooting at us. We went back over the fence again and went in the other direction, and we saw a pine forest over there, and they said, let's get into that forest and get the heck out of here. And we crawled on our stomach, and we finally got into the woods, and they came after us. And they said, well, let's hide behind the trees till they go. And if they don't see us, they might go away. And they came, and I stood behind that tree. We all stood behind each one of those trees. It was just big enough to hide us. And they said, what I'm going to do, so we can't run. They're going to start shooting at us. And I finally, I put my hand out and waved, say, hi. And they said, come on out, you know, hands up. And that's how we got captured.
After months in POW camps, the war ended and Gert returned home, to a Germany transformed and to truths he had never been allowed to see.
I didn't realize how bad it was, but then after the war, everything came democratic, you know, and peaceful. And I said, wait a minute, that's a hell of a lot different than what we went through all that, you know. I didn't know about the full extent of the concentration camp because that was kept so well secret, you know, that we heard about it, you know, but they said that's where murderers go in and wife beaters, you know, and they supposed to be rehabilitated. But they didn't do that. And I didn't know the full extent till I came to the United States. War is the stupidest thing that man invented. If you can't talk it out, if you cannot communicate, you start fighting. You have to do away with your problem. You have to annihilate your problem. But that is not a solution. Yeah, that just create more problems. Don't fight. Talk it out. There got to be a solution. There is always a solution.
Thank you for watching Gert's story. As the last veterans of the Second World War grow older, preserving these memories becomes more important than ever. By sharing these stories, we help them live on for future generations.